Hi everyone, I'm Troy Martin and this is Tea and Finis. Welcome to my whiteboard wafflings. Why whiteboard wafflings? Because this is a whiteboard and I like to waffle. Continuing on from the recent theme of movement and motion, I thought we'd talk about planes of motion. So there's three basic planes of motion. You've got sagittal, frontal and transverse. What does all that mean? So sagittal plane, as you can see from the picture here, hopefully you can see that clearly enough, and my fantastic artwork of the stick man. So the plane is the blue area here, and it's essentially the up and down motion and the forward and back motion. So some of the movements, like exercise-based movements that are in the sagittal plane include squats, deadlifts, curls, and then sports-related activities like cycling and running. So anything that is up and down, forward and back is the sagittal plane. That's most of the activity that you do on a daily basis. The frontal plane. So again, you can see the blue area there. So this is your side-to-side movements. It's your lateral movements. When it comes to exercises, you can talk about side lunges, for instance. Yes, there's a sagittal element to that, but I'll get into that in a moment. But side lunges, lateral raises, when you're training your shoulders. Side planks, really good frontal plane exercise. Windmills, the old kettlebell windmill exercise. And then transverse, this is the one that confuses people the most, but essentially it's your rotational axis. Some of the exercises that are involved in the transverse plane are wood chops, pull-off press, which is your anti-rotation version. So whereas wood chops, you're actively rotating with resistance, with the pull-off press, you're resisting the rotation. Single arm rows, if you're kneeling on the bench doing a single arm row, there's an element of rotation involved in that. And then sports, mainly you're looking at racket sports, golf, baseball, cricket, swinging the bat, those kind of things. Incorporating the movements into your day, into your workouts. So if you think of every movement and every exercise in those three planes of motion, how many of the exercises, like when you write out your workout plans, how many of those exercises are in three planes? How many of those exercises are in any one of these three planes? I guarantee you that probably 80 to 90% of all the exercises you do will be in the sagittal plane. 80 to 90% of all the activity you do on a daily basis will be in the sagittal plane. The next most common one will probably be the transverse plane. If you think about it, when you walk, there's rotation through the gait cycle. When you're opening a door, there's rotation through the torso. The frontal plane, not so much. It's highly unusual that you will be walking sideways unless you're a crab or a Zoidberg. So as I say, in the gym, most of the stuff you do is up and down, forward and back, whether it's squats, deadlifts, lunges, arm curls, overhead press, bench press. It's all in the sagittal plane. Your sports, you sit at a desk all day, you're staring at the screen, or you're driving in your car and then you go home and you go for a run. You're in the sagittal plane. Yes, there's elements of transverse or rotational axis when you're running, as I said with the gait cycle, but it's a sagittal dominant sport, same with cycling. So your whole life is in this sagittal plane, and 5 to 10% of it will be in the other planes, maybe as much as 20% if you're a more active person. So it's really important to try and incorporate these into your workouts. In the first video I talked about the prime movements, the 7 prime human movements and the prime movements for athletics. It's a different consideration to the prime movements. That's talking more about movement patterns. This is talking about joint actions more than anything else. But you can increase the range of motion and the amount of planes of motion in an exercise, I find, quite easily by incorporating arms, using your arms as drivers. So let's take the side lunge as an example. So the side lunge is predominantly a frontal plane exercise. You step to one side and then you do your lunge. But of course, because you're coming down and you're hinging the hips as well, you're also working in the sagittal plane. So it's a dual plane exercise. It's frontal plane and it's sagittal plane. How can we make that a triplanar exercise? You use the arms as drivers, so you step into the frontal plane, you come down into the sagittal plane, you use the arms as a driver, and now you're in the transverse plane. You're getting stretches and muscles activating in areas that you wouldn't do normally. You can add that to a lot of your exercises. I find adding in triplanar exercises during your warm-ups and as part of your prehab routines. So prehab being the routine, the exercises that you will do to try and preempt and prevent the onset of injury, rather than a rehab routine where you're directly rehabilitating from an injury. So within your warm-ups, if you try and add some triplanar motions into those exercises to work more planes of motion, you'd be working more muscle groups, you'd be adding an element of functionality that carries over directly to daily living. Okay, I know the word functional training kind of upsets a lot of people, because, you know, what is functional? If you're a bodybuilder, then surely doing hundreds of arm curls is functional. It might not help you be a better security guard, but it will help you be a better bodybuilder. But because your joints and your body work largely in at least two of the three planes, and very often in all three of those planes, if you incorporate elements of triplanar motion into exercises, it carries over more functionally to daily living. It will increase your ranges of mobility, your stable range of motion, and just your overall quality of life. Okay, so that's a brief overview of planes of motion. I hope you found that useful. If you've got any questions, put them in the box. I'll be happy to answer those. Like, share it on social media, and I'll catch you again soon. Later.